Ah, the internet is buzzing. The transition is here. The transition is now. But what is this transition? What is changing? Are we losing or gaining? Like a good book, this transition has a summary, a back page that tells you a little bit about everything, chapters that are each collectively different, and some form of unified work that required more than one person, where the author had to thank people involved in him writing the book, or her writing the book. So, this transition, what are the aspects that are to come? What are the chapters? Well, one of the first chapters was the tsunami. Because in this transition to come, it is not something that might happen, could happen. It is something that has to happen. If it does not happen, then we cannot exist as a race. In our current state, we have a lot of technologies. We have a machine that can transfer atoms into each other at a fast enough speed that it creates a black hole, a miniature black hole. We have nuclear energy that we don't know how to control. We don't know how to keep it from destroying our entire race. Mostly because it's fairly new. And therefore, in several countries it's missing a lot of fail-safes. Because in places like America, we have all the proper fail-safes if something were to happen. But in other countries where they say, hey, I want nuclear power too. Well, but I'm a poorer country. How am I going to have what they have? Well, I'm just going to build a power plant. I'm not going to build all the extra safety stuff. And, something like this happens, like what happened in Japan. So because of all of our technologies and our quick advancing that we're going through, through improved communication, not only interchangeably business-wise, because business is going overseas more now, but also because of the internet. The internet is still so young, and yet it is uniting people like that. Before, there's subjects that people knew nothing about. And the other day, someone described to me how long it took to get to the moon. Now, the answer he gave me was something that before you couldn't even know. And it's not known outside of the internet. It can only be found on the internet. And, of course, the internet is determined as unreliable source of information because there's a lot of, it's easy to give out misleading information. But people know how to decipher. People know how to find, because deep down you know what the right answers are. And you know how to figure out, okay, how physics works. Okay, how mathematics works, okay? And so when he gave me his answer, I realized, even though a couple years ago nobody knew about this subject, now all of a sudden a random person, he knows how long it takes to get to the moon, how long it really takes, not how long the textbooks in school tell you, not how much you're told to remember, not how much the media tells you, but how much is actually listed on a database that is contrived of text lingo or videos. Now, the internet itself is part of this transition, because the internet interchangeably interconnects everyone, where nobody has their own identity, technically. Technically, nobody has an identity on the internet. Because no matter what happens on here, it's going to end up in someone else's head. I just gave a good example. It's going to instantly spread throughout the world. And it is no longer that we are individuals. We are starting to move towards the transition that is a unified pattern, that is everyone being the same. One and the same, like the Nordics. The Nordics, they all look the same. They're part of that level 1 society. We're still part of that level 0, where we're all wild animals acting individually, caring for only ourselves and our small groups, our families, and not really looking at the bigger entire unit as an entire function, all by itself. We may operate in a way through economic means and financially as one unit, but we don't recognize it as one unit. You see things that are like in the internet, the main language is either English or Mandarin. You're starting to see a narrowing of languages. In most countries, languages are starting to be more broad. It's not uncommon that an entire country is populated by people who speak all kinds of different languages. And they all know some of the language that is supposed to be for that country. Well, eventually, it'll all just be one language. That's part of the transition. Combining everything. One religion. And the religion will just be basically an understanding of what truly is and isn't. Of how things truly just are. That's how atheism was born. Atheism is part of the transition. A need to separate yourself from societal norms. Because right now, societal norms are that nothing's fair, nothing's right, nothing's just. Everything has to be in a specific pattern. Those are society norms. And it's breaking away from that. That really shows the transition. It's breaking away from that to think outside the box and try to think more of how you can help others and less of how you can help yourself in life. The transition has a lot of different chapters. All the things I'm talking about, they're all completely separate movements that have to happen. But in an entirety, it is a book. And a lot of these key factors, these improved communications, and can improve tools, which is technology. Technology is tools of the brain. Improve tools that we cannot operate as separate entities to work with. It is just proof that we will be destroyed if we do not combine our thoughts, if we do not promote things like the internet. If you look at Ricky UFO Abductee's work in the Facebook, you'll notice that he's becoming really, like, he's just trying to really like inform people through solid means of the internet. Because the internet is the one fundamental source that we are currently in the transition. Is the one source in which it doesn't matter what you look like, as long as the information is there, it's going to transfer to someone else, and then that person's going to transfer it to someone else, and someone else, and someone else, and eventually it doesn't matter who started it, because we all believe it as a whole. The internet, the media, the sports that we play, all of these things that we go through, trying to improve dogs and make them into dogs and cats, and improve their household conditions, testing with animals in general, advances in construction and business opportunities. All these things are aspects of the transition from 0 to 1. There are various types of societies in the universe. We are still the same as any wild animal on this planet. For the longest time, religion told people, we are not animals, we are all special entities. Well, okay, then how come dogs dream? How come there are plants out there that eat living creatures and integrate with an even greater system than itself separately? How come everything around us is just as divine as we are? We are not special on this planet. We are just as wild as the hyenas. We are no special entity. We see an ant on the ground, we step on it. We don't feel compassionate towards it. We are just as wild as anything else on this planet. We have to separate ourselves from this planet for this transition to come in whole. We have to not need this planet at all. Like the Greys, like the Nordics, like the Anunnaki. Actually, yeah, Anunnaki. Actually, I have a funny little tidbit about the Anunnaki. I was going to say that they're the same as the Nordics, but the reason why I didn't was because early in Mesopotamic cultures, they used animals to represent things that they didn't quite fully understand. They used turtles to represent flying saucers. The reason why I say things like they use animals to represent things that they didn't understand is because they found an artifact that was a turtle, but its head was sticking out of the shell like a normal turtle would, but its arms were around the side, and the body looked like a disc, with the head poking out. Now they compared this to another Mesopotamic turtle, and the other Mesopotamic turtle looked like an actual turtle. It didn't look like a flying saucer with a head poking out of it. And the head poking out of the turtle that was a flying saucer wasn't like a turtle head, it was like a human head, but it was called the turtle of the flying turtle that attacks the villages. And, in the same sense, for thousands of years later, culture still accumulated animals to represent beings that they didn't fully understand. But in the text that they described the Anunnaki, these beings of large bird heads, owl heads, and dog heads, were light-skinned creatures that had blonde, glowing hair. It was basically Dragon Ball Z, Goku, going Super Saiyan. That's what it is. That's all they are. They were just humans from another planet that the Greys had created. But, they were looked at as something different because they didn't know how to associate it. They took some of the most smartest animals that they knew of in the wild, and they used them to represent because they didn't know how to say, that's just how they operated in those times. So I think that's kind of an interesting tidbit that most people don't really realize. And it's not really having to know anything, it's just, it's research and understanding. Too many people don't think enough outside the box. You have to think a little outside the box to understand these things, and that's all part of the transition. More creative thinking. It's this more creative thinking that has had Americans boom in the video game technology area. For the longest time, Japan, their only leading video game was Final Fantasy. That's all they were known for. While America was going through a long list of just, you can't even stop to even signal it out to just individual games. Because they're leading in all categories. Role-playing, shooting, team sports, virtual games, anything you can think of. Because it's creativity and democracy that'll lead to this transition. The unification of people. Despite how much negativity there is out there and people who say, oh, America's not so great, America's terrible. Look at all the terrible things that they've done and how screwed up their government is. At least we're trying, okay? You have to try before you succeed. And as we keep trying through different methods like the internet, through government, through interrelations with people around us, we little by little will turn into the perfect democracy and will create a unified society. Sorry, I'm a little sick. That's why I'm clearing my throat a lot. But this transition is something I've been meaning to get into detail about. Because there are higher societies, Type 1 societies, that control the entire planet that they live on, and control what happens on it. And they control the weather. They control what happens to the planet and how it interacts with the stars around them. And then there's Type 2, that control entire solar systems and determine how that solar system interacts with other solar systems. And then there's Type 3, that control the flow of the entire universe, that are immortal and impossible to kill because of the technologies that they have created. Because they have become so advanced that they're untouchable. They are ghosts in the network. They're a ghost that can be seen, heard, but not felt. They're not something you cannot affect. They're the entities that keep this universe in a positive forward motion, as they keep moving in positive forward motion. And they say there's an even higher entity that operates in an intellectual pattern that cannot be comprehended by our current means of intelligence as humans. We'd have to raise an intelligence. We'd have to evolve into it. And that evolving is part of this transition. We do need a more compact, a quicker brain processing speed. We do, because if we can improve our brain processing speed, we can react a lot quicker. And we won't be running into a lot of these nuclear problems and meltdowns. It's all part of combining, because when people start to work together, I don't know if you've ever noticed when you've worked with somebody, but when you're working with somebody, as soon as they come up with an idea, it becomes your own idea, and you improve upon it. It's almost like you're already working at a higher frequency of thought, higher speeds. But the fourth entity is dark matter. It is the one thing that we cannot fully understand, and yet it exists. And it interacts with the universe and things outside the universe. And it has to interact with things outside the universe because it is constantly latching itself into different star patterns, and it's constantly interfering with the gravitational effects of visible light, the passage, because physical light cannot touch it. It rotates the light around it. It operates in a manner that it can control anything in this universe, but it is separate from this universe. But because there's not enough gravity to hold this entire universe together, dark matter does. And as dark matter starts to split up, so does our universe, which is why the universe is slowly drifting apart right now. How can we classify dark matter? We can classify it as God, or, we can classify it as a technical error. Or we could relate it to the sense that if you look at any information on an atom, it is one particle with all these other particles constantly moving around it, rubbing off of each other, causing friction. But there's always a lot of space in between them. And in space, there's a lot of space in between everything else. Even though space is not completely derived of empty existence, a vacuum, even though there are still a lot of particles and dust and debris in that space, it itself has a lot of empty particles, empty areas that we cannot physically perceive. We cannot physically perceive them because they are the combination of matter that has all that it itself is only 50% visible. The atom, of atoms that are 50% visible is a combination of them. Therefore, it is not visible. A lot of people think that dark matter is like a big dark rock or something in space. It's not necessarily that. That's a misunderstanding. It's actually a big group of clouds of dust and well, it looks like dust. It looks like some sort of debris, but it blocks all light from background stars, so you cannot visibly see it. So it just sort of looks like a unseeable dust, just like an area where it's just sort of musty, and no matter what angle you're looking, you can't see the things that are behind it. Unlike a black hole that is actually sucking in matter. And the reason why it's not any sort of gaseous system is because it does not have any stellar spectral dark linings that happen when wavelengths are absorbed by the gases. There's no indicator of its physical being other than the fact that gravity is all pulled towards it. And as we venture out into space and become a Type 1 society, will we interact with other Type 1 creatures? Well, if we are moving from wildlife, from interacting with the wildlife here on Earth and being needy of elements and interspecies connections, then we will have to move towards being needy and having to interact with other types of species. So yes and no, because it is most likely not to be a friendly understanding, not a friendly environment that we will be in, because since when are we friendly towards other species on this planet. It's all a network, and there are times where there's peace, and there are times where we find creatures that we want to take into our home. We find plants that we want to promote and try to help out and use for our own self-feeding. But there's also times where it's all fighting. But in order for people to want to have jobs because they feel that it is important and go to places like meditation clinics just because they feel that they need to, and not because of some media programming, societal programming, we have to want a spiritual change, a change in the way that we look at our own spirituality, our own existence in this universe. We have to detach ourselves from everything. As everything on this planet will start to fall down in our hands, like ice cream that has been held for too long without licking in the hot sun. As it all starts to melt away, we will have to build up our feeling of each other's ki energy. And instead of being needy of the planet and our foods, we'll have to be needy of each other. We have to be willing to destroy our own entire house. Get rid of everything you own, your bed, your TVs, your video games. And I'm sure people right now are saying, oh, no, I can't do that. But in time, we will be ready, or we'll die. This transition may be an end, but it's also a beginning. It is something beautiful and majestic where we interact with a whole new way of living in life and creatures. You all dream of other worlds and controlling other planets? Let's go there. Let's do it together as a family. One society, one entire race, full of love and connection. Where things like sexuality don't matter. Where you don't be with somebody because of if they're male or female. Because you're with them because you love them. Because you don't feel the need to have sex with them or to express your love. But simply because they're the greatest person you have ever met, and there's nobody else you want to be with for the rest of your life. Something completely away from societal norms right now. Because societal norms tell you, okay, you have to be straight. You have to be this way or another way. You cannot choose to be however you want to be. You have to be this one or that one. You have to be gay or straight. You have to be bisexual, straight, or gay. You can't just choose to love people for who they are. You have to love them for what they are. Okay, that's wrong. We shouldn't have to choose. This transition is also about free rights, free love, less government and more people. A lot of people say that the problem with our world right now is that too many dumb people are having children. It's not that too many dumb people are having children. It's that not enough people are focusing on the children. Not enough people are focusing on the fact that they're not the only ones here. That they need to stop thinking about just themselves and think more about everybody. Let the child be born. There's nothing wrong. Just because that family is poor or doesn't reach societal norms or levels of intelligence doesn't mean they're not capable of expressing love to the child and truly showing the child who it is deep down and bringing out its inner instincts into the world. I'm already ready. We need people to start saying they're ready for the transition. Even though the transition is a long process. In the life of this planet, it is something small. And if we can cope with it, eventually we can try to bring up another species that will try to move from level 0 to level 1. Just as the Greys have done for us. If we evolve and we move into level 1, we will be able to interact with the Greys. They will be one of our first major friends in this universe. And all we need is love. Love, that's all we need. We don't need these helms. We don't need any of these attachments. None of them are necessary. All you need is love. You don't need these jobs. You don't need these cars. As long as we have each other, we can find ways to make things work. We can find ways to feed people. We can find ways to house people off or on this planet. Let's love each other for once.